Welcome back to the program. German prosecutors have charged a 68-year-old man suspected of drugging and raping 14 women he met online on online dating platforms and filming his attacks. The case has drawn comparisons with the high-profile case of Frenchwoman Gisèle Pelicot. We're joined now by the DW correspondent Arthur Sullivan in Berlin. Arthur, thank you for joining us on the program. What are the main details of this case?
Yeah, so the investigation into this case began in March 2025. A 68-year-old suspect right here in the German capital, Berlin, had appeared on online chat logs with another man whom authorities were investigating separately. Now, that other man has since died, but the new investigation into this 68-year-old suspect gathered momentum when his home was searched last year and a number of devices there were found to contain footage of various sexual offences, rape and sexual assault. Now, this week, the case developed significantly when the prosecutors here in Germany charged this man with 22 counts of aggravated rape involving 14 women. Now, the total figure of victims is believed to be much higher, with 58 women suspected to have been raped, although many of them have not been identified yet, and in some of the other cases, investigations are ongoing. Now, the perpetrator here is strongly suspected of drugging the victims and filming the attacks and rapes, and he has been in detention since March. He has not made any comment on the case at this point. It's now up to the courts here to proceed, but the suspicion is that he met the women online and drugged them and raped them without any of them having any knowledge whatsoever of the attacks, and they only found out about these rapes and attacks when they were shown videos that had been retrieved by investigators.
Arthur, this case has drawn comparisons with the Pelicot case in France, and it's just the latest in Germany of a high-profile mass rape case involving victims being drugged, isn't it?
Yeah, so this horrendous and extraordinary case of Gisèle Pelicot, the French woman who was drugged by her own husband, raped by him and dozens of other men, that drew attention to these cases, which unfortunately are becoming increasingly common here in Europe, where victims are raped unbeknownst to them. And indeed, in many cases, there's collaboration between perpetrators online. And there is some parallels, clearly, with this case and the Pelicot case, such as drugging the victims, secretly filming the attacks. And this latest case in Berlin comes less than a week after a separate case where a 32-year-old Chinese doctor who's long based here in Germany was sentenced to 5 years in jail for aggravated rape. And he was part of a wider investigation into a Telegram group which involved several perpetrators who were on the app sharing information about, methods in which they would commit their crimes, information about sedation and so on. And several of the men in that group have now been convicted. And that's against a wider backdrop of these types of cases in Europe. So earlier this month, investigators in the UK said that they had discovered an international network which was organising drug-facilitated sexual assault. And then separately, Europol, so that's the agency which combines different police forces here in Europe, it was working to identify more than 150 victims of drug-facilitated sexual assaults in 7 different countries. And the big thing with all these cases is that it shows sexual assault and rape cases know no boundaries, no distinction between class, occupation or creed. There are simply victims and perpetrators, and what's perhaps most shocking here is that in many of these cases, the perpetrators are sharing information online, doing it quite publicly in these Telegram groups and other online groups, and using their knowledge of separate attacks to lead to other attacks. So there seems to be more of these cases than we could have previously imagined.
How horrific, Arthur. Is this case, however, causing a major outcry in Germany and leading to debate around rape and laws related to it?
The case has made headlines in Germany, but so far it has not been a huge story, certainly not in any way comparable to the way that the Pelicot case became this big global story and which made Gisèle Pelicot a global feminist icon. Now, exactly why it hasn't is somewhat hard to say. I mean, one aspect here that's important to remember is that this case has not yet fully proceeded to court, so we haven't had a public trial yet. But it is important to remember as well that, unlike France and many other European countries, Germany is extremely protective of the identity, not just of victims, but also perpetrators of crimes. It's quite rare that perpetrators are named even after prosecution. Their rights to privacy are very strongly protected in Germany. But when one does examine this case closely, you would think that there probably should be a wider debate here, because it does shine a light on some of the issues with German law when it comes to rape. So in particular the case of drug-facilitated rape, there are specific issues. In this case, although 58 women are suspected of being victims in the case, one of the cases at least, and possibly more, falls outside the statute of limitations. So the statute of limitations in rape cases which are deemed not to involve the use of force is just 5 years. Now that's a little bit hard to get your head around, because the act of rape, you would think, itself inherently involves force, but unfortunately for the case of one of these alleged victims, it may not proceed due to that statute of limitations. And then there's other issues around how the drugs used to sedate victims are classified. So 2 years ago, Germany's highest court ruled that so-called date rape drugs could not be classed as, quote, dangerous items in the context of sexual assault. So something like a knife or a gun would obviously be a dangerous item, but in this case, date rape drugs are not designated dangerous items. And what does that mean in practice? It means that if they're used in a rape, it doesn't guarantee the minimum sentence of 5 years which would come about in the case of, for example, a knife or another dangerous item being used. So the government here is now looking to change this law, but on the whole, this case raises several questions about how difficult it is for victims of rape to ultimately get justice.
Indeed, Arthur, it's also the same here. It's quite difficult for them to get justice, quite difficult for them to be believed. Arthur Sullivan, the DW correspondent in Berlin. Now